Hi guys, welcome to this video. I'm Prashant, I'm the founder of Word Pandit, and I'm bringing a series of videos to you wherein I explain to you previous year CAT questions, CAT RCs. This in particular is a passage analysis video. What do we do in these passage analysis videos? We pick up CAT passages, we analyze them, go through them line by line and try to understand the important pointers. You can use these pointers to solve questions, understand the RC passages better, and also develop an approach how you should read these passages. Let's get started. This is a passage based on epigenetics. What it is, we'll discuss it during the course of this passage analysis video. Let's get started. When researchers at Emory University in Atlanta trained mice to fear the smell of almonds by pairing it with electric shocks. So for example, whenever they exposed these mice to the smell of almonds, they would have given electrical shocks to them. So this basically made sure that mice, they began to fear the smell of almonds. They found, to their consternation, this is to their alarm or dismay, that both the children and grandchildren of these mice were spontaneously afraid of the same smell. Why did this alarm them? This is not supposed to happen. Generations of school children have been taught that the inheritance of acquired characteristics is impossible. Remember, this is an acquired characteristic. You're giving them shocks, you're teaching them something. This is not something in their genes itself. There is no genetic code that mice need to fear the smell of almonds. So they were taught this particular thing. This was acquired characteristics, this was acquired behavior. And we've always been taught that you cannot inherit acquired characteristics. A mouse should not be born with something his parents have learned during their lifetimes any more than a mouse that loses its tail in an accident should give birth to a tailless mice. Since this does not happen, right? For example, if a mice has an accident and it loses a tail, the next generation would have that tail, right? So this is something that baffled these researchers. Modern evolutionary biology dates back to a synthesis that emerged around 1940s and 60s, which married Charles Darwin's mechanism of natural selection, which basically talks about genes select themselves, the best possible remain is the survival of the fittest, with Gregor Mendel's discoveries of how genes are inherited. So two theories were married, Charles Darwin's and Gregor Mendel's. The traditional and still dominant view is that adaptations from the human brain to the peacock's tail, so for the complete spectrum of animal kingdom right here, are fully and satisfactorily explained by natural selection and subsequent inheritance. So far we've believed, and this is the traditional and the dominant view, that the in terms of acquired characteristics, in terms of adaptations, these are explained by natural selection. Yet new evidence from genomics, epigenetics, and developmental biology indicates that evolution is more complex than we once assumed. So things are a lot more complex than we assumed. In his book on human nature, evolutionary biologist Edward O. Wilson claimed that human culture is held on by a genetic leash. What kind of a leash are we talking? The metaphor needs revision. So in this book, we basically talked about it is held on by genes. Genes drive culture. That's the leash which is holding human culture. This, according to the author, now needs revision. Imagine a dog walker, the genes, struggling to retain control of a brawny mastiff. So it's like a big dog, right? And big muscular dog. So the human genes represent something which is very powerful, and the genes, they are struggling to maintain control of it. The pair's trajectory, the pathway of evolution, reflects the outcome of the struggle, whether culture is going to dominate genes or genes are going to dominate culture. Now imagine the same dog walker struggling with multiple dogs on leashes of varied lengths, with each dog tugging in different directions. All these tugs represent the influence of development factors, including epigenetics, antibodies, hormones passed on by parents, as well as ecological legacies and culture they bequeath. So these are all the different factors which are pulling human beings in different directions, and genes are struggling to cope with it. So we had assumed that genes are the ones which are guiding human culture, but what if there are all these other factors which are influencing genes? What if it is the other way around? And that is why this metaphor needs revision, and that is what this metaphor talks about. Now there have been a couple of references here already to epigenetics, what it is. So I've extracted the definition of epigenetics and put it here within the passage itself. Remember, this paragraph is not part of the original passage. This is something that I have added. Now what is epigenetics? In biology, epigenetics is the study of heritable phenotype changes that do not involve alterations in the DNA sequence. In simple language, this is the study of changes in our genes, right, or part of our genes that do not involve alterations in our DNA sequence. The DNA sequence is not changed. The Greek prefix epi in epigenetics implies that are on top of or in addition to traditional genetic basis for inheritance. So without really changing the structure or altering the sequence of the DNA sequence, there are changes which take place in our genes. So the changes that take place without changing the DNA sequence, these fall under the category of epigenetics. So physically the DNA sequence does not change, but still there are changes in the genes. There are some other factors which are influencing those genes. The received wisdom, or things that we've assumed so far, the received wisdom refers to things that we've accepted so far, is that parental experiences can't affect the characters of their offspring, except that they do. The way that genes are expressed to produce an organism's phenotype, the actual characteristics it ends up with, is affected by chemicals that attach to them. Everything from diet to air pollution to parental behavior can influence the addition or removal of these chemical marks, which switches genes on or off. So now you are saying is genes have a chemical composition, fair enough, they have a phenotype, but this is in turn affected by chemicals it ends up with. So all the things that you are being exposed to, this is exposing your genes to different kinds of chemical reactions, and hence it's leading to changes. Usually these so-called epigenetic attachments are removed during the production of sperm and egg cells. So basically what you assumed was epigenetic attachments, things which are changing your genes, the chemicals which are changing your genes, while the production of sperm and egg cells, that is while reproduction, these are assumed to be removed. But it turns out that some escape the resetting process and are passed on to the next generation along with the genes. This is known as epigenetic inheritance, and more studies are confirming that it really happens. Let's return to the almond-bearing mice. The inheritance of epigenetic mark transmitted in the sperm is what led the mice's offspring to acquire an inherited fear. Now all of a sudden, epigenetic inheritance is the explanation for mice acquiring that, inheriting that fear, right? Epigenetics is only a part of the story. Through culture and society, humans and other animals inherit knowledge, skills by their parents. All this complexity points to an evolutionary process in which genomes over hundreds of thousands of generations, epigenetic modification and inherited cultural factors over several, perhaps tens of thousands of generations, and parental effects over single generation time spans collectively inform how organisms adapt. So it's not one single thing. Epigenetics is just one of the factors. Then you've got genomes, epigenetic modifications, cultural factors, parental effects. All these have an impact. These extra genetic kinds of inheritance. So genetic kinds of inheritance, these look like genetic in nature, but they are different from genes, right? Give organisms the flexibility to make rapid adjustments to environmental changes, dragging genetic changes in their wake, much like a rowdy pack of dogs. So like a rowdy pack of dogs heading off in different directions, leading to changes in the genes. That is what is happening. Genes are being dragged by these different factors in different directions, leading to changes. This is a brilliant passage based on genetics, a little bit of understanding of genetics, and will take you a long way in understanding this passage. Through this passage analysis, you've learned what epigenetics is, you've understood the particular term. This is how you analyze RC passage. This is how you analyze the content in an RC passage. Hopefully so the passage is clear to you now. Thank you very much for watching this video and happy learning.